The morning sun rose over New York City like it had done a million times before. People walked to work. Children went to school. Nobody looked up at the sky. Nobody knew that everything was about to change forever. Danny Holt was eating breakfast on Mars when the first reports came in. He was a captain in the Marine Corps, stationed at the small military base near Olympus, Mons. The year was 2147, and humanity had spread across the solar system. They had bases on the Moon, Mars, and several moons of Jupiter and Saturn. But they had never met another intelligent species. They had never found proof that they were not alone in the universe. That changed at 9:47 a.m. Earth Standard Time. The ships appeared without warning, hundreds of them, massive and dark, dropping out of some kind of faster-than-light travel that human scientists had only dreamed about. They formed a ring around Earth like a noose around a neck. For exactly 17 minutes they did nothing. The world held its breath. Governments tried to make contact. Radio signals were sent in every language. Mathematical sequences, music, anything that might show peaceful intent. The aliens did not respond with words. They responded with fire. The first beam of light struck Tokyo. One moment, 13 million people were going about their lives. The next moment, there was nothing but a crater of glass and ash. Before the screams could even begin, more beams fell. New York, London, Beijing, Moscow, Sydney. One by one, the great cities of Earth died. Danny watched it happen on a screen, surrounded by other Marines who stood in frozen horror. He saw the satellite feeds. He saw the numbers climbing. 1 billion dead, 2 billion, 3 billion. The attacks lasted 48 hours. When they finally stopped, Earth was burning and half of humanity was gone. The aliens called themselves the. This information came later, pulled from captured equipment and prisoners. They were an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had conquered over 300 species. To them, Earth was just another resource-rich planet occupied by primitive creatures that needed to be cleared away. High Commander led the attack fleet. He was tall and gray-skinned, with 4 eyes that showed no emotion as he watched Earth burn. He had done this many times before. They had a simple method: destroy the population centers, break the spirit of the natives, then send in ground forces to eliminate the survivors. It usually took a few weeks, sometimes a few months for the more stubborn species. Expected the same with Earth. He was very, very wrong. On the Moon, a woman named watched the attack from a research station. She was a physicist, working on experimental propulsion systems. She was supposed to die that day. A strike had targeted her facility, but a malfunction in their targeting system caused the beam to miss by 3 kilometers. She survived. She saw the destruction of everything she knew, and something inside her changed. She gathered the other survivors at the lunar station. There were 47 of them. Scientists, engineers, technicians. They had no weapons. They had no warships. But they had minds and they had rage. "We are going to study them," said, her voice steady even as tears ran down her face. "We are going to learn how their ships work, and then we are going to make them pay." Admiral Chris commanded humanity's space fleet. It was small. 23 warships designed to patrol the solar system and protect shipping lanes from pirates. Nothing that could stand against the Armada. When the attack began, his first instinct was to fight, to die with honor defending his home. But Chris was not a fool. He was 62 years old. He had fought in 3 wars. He knew that a dead hero was still dead. He made the hardest decision of his life. He ordered the fleet to scatter and hide in the asteroid belt. They would not fight today. They would survive. They would rebuild. And one day they would have their revenge. "We will not die quietly," he broadcast to every surviving human in the solar system. "We will not surrender. We will not forget. They started this war. We will finish it." On Earth, the ground forces landed expecting easy cleanup. They found something else entirely. In the ruins of Chicago, a young woman named organized the first resistance cell. She had been a police officer before the attack. Now she was a soldier. She taught survivors how to make bombs from household chemicals, how to set ambushes in the rubble, how to kill aliens and disappear before reinforcements arrived. They had better weapons, better armor, better technology, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. Every human they killed had a family that wanted revenge. Every city they destroyed became a fortress of rubble where snipers waited. Every night brought new attacks, new explosions, new dead soldiers. Stood in his command ship and reviewed the casualty reports with growing confusion. This was not how conquered species behaved. They were supposed to break. They were supposed to surrender. They were supposed to accept their fate. These humans did none of those things. They fought like cornered animals. They fought like they had nothing to lose, because they didn't. Danny Holt established contact with resistance cells across Earth from his base on Mars. The communication was difficult, but they managed. He coordinated attacks. He shared information. He gave the survivors something they desperately needed: hope. "This is not the end," he told them in his broadcasts. "This is the beginning. They think they broke us. They are wrong. Humanity does not break. Humanity bends, and then humanity snaps back. Every empire falls. Every tyrant dies. They will learn this lesson. We will teach them." His team found a crashed scout ship in the lunar highlands. The pilot was dead, killed by the impact, but the ship was mostly intact. She and her team began to take it apart piece by piece, studying every component, learning every secret. The faster-than-light drive was the prize. It was technology centuries beyond human science, but was brilliant, and she was motivated by grief. She worked 20 hours a day. She slept only when her body forced her to. She dreamed of burning cities and woke up screaming. Then she went back to work. They expected the conquest of Earth to take 1 month. After 6 months, they still did not control the planet. After 1 year, they had lost 10,000 soldiers and gained nothing but ash and blood. For the first time the mighty empire had found an enemy that refused to die. In the darkness of space, hidden among the asteroids, Admiral's fleet waited, and planned, and built. The war had just begun. 2 years had passed since the sky burned. Earth was still occupied, but it was not conquered. They had learned this difference the hard way. Moved through the ruins of Chicago like a ghost. The city was unrecognizable now. The tall buildings were gone, replaced by mountains of broken concrete and twisted metal. But people still lived here. They lived in tunnels and basements and hidden shelters. They came out at night to fight. Tonight had a target. A command center had been established in what used to be a shopping mall. 50 alien soldiers lived there. They thought they were safe behind their energy shields and advanced weapons. They were wrong. Had 40 fighters with her. They carried homemade explosives and captured alien rifles. They had studied the command center for weeks. They knew every guard rotation, every weakness, every shadow. The attack lasted 7 minutes. When it was over, the command center was burning and every inside was dead. Lost 3 of her people. She carried their names in her heart alongside thousands of others. Then she vanished into the ruins before enemy reinforcements could arrive. On Mars, Danny Holt had been promoted to colonel. The title felt strange to him. Before the attack, he had been a simple soldier. Now he was one of the leaders of human resistance. He coordinated operations across Earth from a hidden base deep underground. He rarely slept. He rarely ate. He lived on coffee and rage. "They are bringing more troops," his intelligence officer reported. "Another 20,000 arriving next month." Danny nodded. "Then we'll kill 20,000 more. They can't bring enough soldiers to hold a planet that doesn't want them." High Commander stood before his superiors and tried to explain his failure. It did not go well. The council was ancient and powerful. They had not risen to their positions by accepting excuses. "You told us this planet would be in 1 month," the council leader said. "It has been 2 years. Our losses are unacceptable." Felt something he had never felt before in his military career: shame. These humans are unlike any species we have encountered. They do not respond to overwhelming force. They do not surrender when faced with certain death. They fight harder. Then make them stop. But did not know how. He had tried everything. Mass executions made the humans fight harder. Destroying their food supplies made them fight harder. Threatening their families made them fight harder. Nothing broke their spirit. He was beginning to think nothing ever would. Far from Earth, in the cold darkness of the asteroid belt, humanity was being reborn. Admiral Chris had gathered every surviving ship, every skilled worker, every scrap of resources. Hidden bases were built on asteroids and moons. Factories were constructed deep underground where sensors could not find them. Had become the most important person in human civilization. Her team had cracked the secrets of faster-than-light travel. It had taken 18 months of work that nearly drove her insane, but she had done it. The drive works by bending space, she explained to Admiral. They create a bubble around the ship that moves through a higher dimension. We can build this. We have the materials. We have the knowledge. We can reach the stars. Was 70 years old now. His hair was white. His bones ached. But his eyes were sharp and his mind was sharper. How long until we have ships? 2 years for a prototype. 5 years for a fleet. Make it 3 years for a fleet. We don't have 5 years. Wanted to argue that it was impossible. But she had learned that impossible was just a word that meant difficult when humans were desperate enough. Commander Torres was Admiral's second-in-command. He was younger, more cautious, and deeply worried about the plan that was forming. You want to attack the Empire directly, he said. With what? A handful of ships. They have thousands. They rule half the galaxy. Smiled. It was not a warm smile. They ruled half the galaxy because nobody fought back. We're going to show the galaxy what happens when someone does. It's suicide. Maybe, but sitting here waiting to die is also suicide. I'd rather die fighting. Back on Earth, the resistance grew stronger every day. Humans who had hidden in the first months of the invasion were now joining the fight. Children who had been 10 years old when the attack happened were now 12 and learning to shoot. They controlled the cities, but they did not control the hearts of the people. Became a legend. Stories spread about the woman who had killed 100 soldiers. The number was exaggerated, but not by much. She trained fighters. She planned attacks. She gave speeches that made people believe they could win. They came here thinking we were weak, she told a group of new recruits. They looked at our technology and thought we were primitive. They were right about the technology, but technology is not what makes a species strong. Will is what makes a species strong, and our will is iron. Requested reinforcements from the Empire. The request was granted, but with a warning. The Council was losing patience. If Earth was not within another year, would be replaced, and in the Empire being replaced usually meant being executed. He increased patrols. He built more outposts. He brought in specialists in counterinsurgency. Nothing worked. Every night brought new attacks. Every morning brought new dead soldiers. The humans were like water flowing around obstacles, seeping through cracks, impossible to contain. In the Lunar Research Station, completed the first human faster-than-light drive. It was ugly. It was inefficient. It was cobbled together from alien technology and human engineering. But it worked. The test flight lasted only 30 seconds. The small probe jumped from Earth's moon to Mars in the blink of an eye. When the data came back confirming success, collapsed into a chair and cried. She cried for the billions who had died. She cried for the years of exhausting work. She cried for the future that was now possible. Admiral stood before the assembled survivors of the human fleet. There were nearly 5,000 people now, gathered from every corner of the solar system. Soldiers, scientists, engineers, farmers, teachers, everyone who had survived and refused to surrender. We have broken the chains that held us to this solar system, he said. The thought they trapped us here. They thought Earth would be our grave. They were wrong. Today we begin building a fleet that will carry us to the stars, not to explore, not to trade, to fight, to liberate our home, to make them understand that attacking humanity was the greatest mistake their empire ever made. The first true warship capable of interstellar travel was completed 6 months later. They called it the USS Defiance. It was not beautiful, it was not elegant, but it was deadly and it was ready for war. Danny Holt received the news on Mars. He stared at the message for a long time, then allowed himself to smile. It was the first time he had smiled in 2 years. "We're coming," he said quietly, thinking of the soldiers on Earth who had no idea what was about to happen. "We're coming for all of you." The embers of humanity had survived the fire. Now they were about to become an inferno. 4 years after the attack on Earth, the reinforcement fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system. 12 massive warships, carrying enough soldiers and firepower to crush any remaining human resistance. High Commander watched from his bridge as his ships approached Neptune. "Begin scanning for human vessels," he ordered. "They have been hiding in the asteroid belt. Flush them out." His sensor officer's response made him freeze. "Commander, I'm detecting human vessels. Many human vessels. They're not hiding. They're directly ahead of us." Looked at the tactical display and felt the first cold fingers of fear wrap around his heart. There were 40 human warships arranged in battle formation. Ships that had not existed 4 years ago. Ships that should have been impossible. Admiral Chris's face appeared on the communication screen. He looked older than remembered from the intelligence files, but his eyes were burning with fury. "Welcome to our solar system," said. "You are not leaving it." The Battle of Neptune's Gate lasted 6 hours. It was the first true space battle between humans and they had better shields. They had more experience. But the humans had something else. They had nothing to lose, and they had spent 4 years designing weapons specifically to kill ships. Captain Amy flew her fighter through the chaos of the battle. She was 28 years old. She had been a pilot on Mars when the attack happened. She had lost her entire family in the first wave of bombardment. Every ship she destroyed was dedicated to their memory. "Target locked," she said, her voice calm despite the explosions around her. "Firing." Her missiles struck a cruiser directly in its engine section. The shields held for half a second, then collapsed. The cruiser broke apart in a ball of fire. Amy was already turning toward her next target. By the end of the battle, 8 ships were destroyed. The remaining 4 surrendered. It was the first time in 12,000 years that warships had surrendered to anyone. Admiral stood on his bridge, watching the captured ships being boarded by human marines. He allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, then pushed it aside. This was just the beginning. "Download their navigation databases," he ordered. "I want to know where every outpost in this sector is located. We're taking the war to them." Danny Holt was promoted to general. The title felt even stranger than colonel had, but he accepted it because the job needed to be done. He was given command of the first human expeditionary force. Their mission was to strike supply lines and find allies. "Intelligence suggests they have enslaved hundreds of species," told him. "Many of them might be willing to fight if they saw that the Empire could be beaten. Show them it can be beaten." Holt's fleet jumped to the system, a world they had conquered 3,000 years ago. There were small beings, only about a meter tall, with blue skin and large, dark eyes. They had been slaves for so long that most of them had forgotten their people had ever been free. Was a worker in the mines when the human ships appeared in the sky. She watched with the others as explosions lit up the orbital stations. She saw the garrison scrambling to respond to an attack they had never expected. Then the human soldiers landed. They were tall and strange-looking, with their pale skin and bizarre eyes that only faced forward. They killed the guards with terrifying efficiency. And then they did something that could not understand. They opened the cages. They broke the chains. They looked at thee and said words that had not been spoken on this world in 3,000 years. You are free. Approached one of the human soldiers. He was tall and with tired eyes that had seen too much death. His name tag said Holt. Why, she asked, why would you free us? What do you want from us? General Holt looked at her for a long moment. Then he knelt down so they were at the same eye level. 4 years ago they came to our world. They killed half our people. They thought they could break us. They were wrong. He paused. I free you because slavery is evil, but I also free you because I want you to help me destroy the Empire. They have ruled this galaxy through fear for 12,000 years. It's time for that to end. Will you fight with us? Thought about her parents, worked to death in the mines. She thought about her children, born into chains. She thought about 3,000 years of suffering. Then she looked at this strange alien creature who was offering her something she had never dared to dream. Yes, she said, we will fight. The liberation of the sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For the first time, enslaved species saw that they could be beaten. Rebellions broke out on dozens of worlds. Some were crushed, but others succeeded, especially when human ships arrived to help. Continued her work, developing new weapons to give humanity every advantage possible. Her latest creation was the Hellfire Cannon, a weapon that used a directed energy beam capable of cutting through shields like they were made of paper. The shields are designed to stop conventional weapons, she explained to the military commanders. They expect missiles and plasma. They don't expect this. She showed them the test footage. A warship reduced to slag in under 30 seconds. We can win this war. Captain Amy led a daring raid on a shipyard deep in enemy territory. Her squadron destroyed 47 warships before they could even launch. They had never experienced anything like it. An enemy that came from nowhere, struck without warning, and disappeared before they could respond. The Emperor of the finally learned about humanity. His advisors had been keeping the reports from him, afraid of his anger. When he finally saw the full scope of what was happening, he was not angry. He was dismissive. A single primitive species has won some minor victories, he said. This is not a crisis. Send more ships, crush them. But High Commander, now stripped of his rank and imprisoned for his failures, knew the truth. He had seen the humans up close. He had fought them for years. He knew what the Emperor did not understand. They are not primitive, he said to no one in particular, sitting in his cell. They are the most dangerous species we have ever encountered, and the Emperor's arrogance will be our destruction. On Earth, the resistance continued. Heard about the victories in space and felt hope for the first time in years. The occupation was weakening. They were pulling troops off Earth to fight elsewhere. The end was coming. She gathered her fighters for what she promised would be the final push. Our people are coming home, she told them. They're fighting across the galaxy and they're winning. Now it's our turn. We're going to take back our planet one city at a time, starting tonight. The wolves of humanity had awakened, and they were hungry for justice. 7 years had passed since the first attacked Earth. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. What began as a simple conquest had become an existential war for the survival of the oldest empire in known space. General Danny Holt stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Vengeance, looking at a star map that would have seemed like fantasy just a few years ago. Human fleets operated in 12 different star systems. Allied species now numbered in the dozens. The coalition he helped build had become a force that they could no longer ignore. But the cost had been terrible. Danny carried the weight of every soldier who had died under his command. Thousands of names, thousands of faces. He saw them in his dreams every night. He woke up each morning and pushed the guilt aside because there was work to be done. Admiral is requesting a conference, his communications officer reported. Danny nodded and walked to the communications center. His face appeared on the screen. The Admiral was 74 now. He looked like he was 90. The war had aged him terribly. but his mind was still sharp. "Danny, I have news. They have officially joined the coalition." They were a warrior species that the had conquered 800 years ago. They were physically powerful, standing nearly 3 meters tall with armored scales and 4 muscular arms. They had used them as shock troops for centuries. Now they wanted revenge. "How many ships can they contribute?" 60 warships, 200,000 ground troops, all of them very angry at their former masters. Danny allowed himself a small smile. That changes things. It changed everything. The coalition now had enough strength to threaten the core worlds. The outer territories were already falling. The supply lines were collapsing. The 12,000-year-old empire was beginning to crack. Emperor finally understood the danger. He was ancient even by standards. He had ruled for 600 years. He had seen threats come and go, but this was different. This enemy did not negotiate. This enemy did not stop. This enemy seemed to grow stronger with every battle. He called a council of war. The greatest military minds in the empire gathered to discuss what had once seemed impossible, the potential fall of the. "We will mobilize everything," declared. "Every ship, every soldier, every resource. We will assemble the largest fleet in galactic history and crush these humans once and for all." The mobilization began. Thousands of warships were pulled from garrison duty across the empire. Billions of soldiers were drafted. They were preparing for a fight that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Watched the intelligence reports with growing concern. She had given humanity the technology to reach the stars. She had given them weapons to fight the. Now she was facing a decision that haunted her every waking moment. She had built something new, something terrible. She called it the Nova Bomb. "It works by destabilizing the fusion reaction in a star," she explained to General Holt and Admiral. "When detonated near a star, it causes a chain reaction. The star goes supernova. Everything in the system is destroyed." The room was silent. Finally spoke. "You're talking about a weapon that can destroy entire solar systems." "Yes." "Can the build one?" Shook her head. "It's based on principles they never developed. They don't even know it's possible." Danny looked at the device in his hands. It was small, no bigger than a human head, and it could kill billions. "Why did you build this?" Met his eyes. There were tears in hers. "Because we might need it. Because if we lose, if everything fails, we need a way to make sure that can never threaten anyone again. But I pray we never have to use it." Danny took the device. He felt its weight, both physical and moral. "I pray the same thing." On Earth, the liberation had begun. Led the assault on the ruins of New York. The garrison there had been reduced over the years as troops were pulled to fight elsewhere. The remaining soldiers were tired, demoralized, and unprepared for the fury that descended upon them. The battle lasted 3 days. When it was over, the human flag flew over New York for the first time in 7 years, stood in the ashes of Times Square and wept. They were tears of joy and grief mixed together. So many had died for this moment. So many would never see it. Had become a leader among the liberated species. She coordinated the alien forces that fought alongside humanity, translating not just languages but cultures. She helped humans understand that not all were evil, that many were simply products of a system that had never known anything else. "The empire must fall," she told the Coalition Council. "But what comes after? More conquest, more slavery, or something better?" It was a question that Danny Holt thought about often. What would victory look like? What kind of galaxy did they want to create? He didn't have answers, but he knew they needed to find them before the war ended. Was brought before General Holt. The former high commander was thin now, worn down by years of captivity, but there was still intelligence in his 4 eyes. "Why am I here?" he asked. "Because I need information. The location of the Emperor's throne world, the defenses around it, everything you know." Laughed. It was a bitter sound. You're actually going to attack Prime. With what your little fleet? The Emperor has assembled 10,000 warships to defend it. You'll be annihilated. Maybe, but we're going anyway. The question is whether you help us or not. Why would I help you? Danny leaned forward. Because your empire is finished regardless. The only question is how it ends. Help us and maybe we can end it with minimal bloodshed, a negotiated surrender, a chance for your people to survive, refuse, and we'll grind through every defense until nothing is left. Those are your choices. Was silent for a long time. He thought about his career, his loyalty, his species. He thought about the humans he had tried to exterminate and who had instead risen to threaten everything he knew. Finally, he made his decision. I'll tell you everything. The intelligence provided changed the coalition's plans. They knew the weak points now. They knew the Emperor's strategies. They knew how to win. Admiral addressed the combined fleet before the final campaign. We have come further than anyone thought possible. We have bled for every light year. We have lost friends, family, and home. But we have not lost ourselves. We fight not for conquest but for freedom, not for revenge but for justice. The Empire has ruled this galaxy through fear for 12,000 years. Tomorrow, we teach them what fear truly means. The fleet jumped to hyperspace. The final battle was about to begin. 10 years after the sky burned over Earth, the Coalition fleet arrived at Prime. General Danny Holt looked at the enemy through his viewport. It was beautiful in its way. A blue and green planet not unlike Earth, orbiting a golden star. Millions have lived there. Civilians who had nothing to do with the attack on humanity. Children who had been born after the war began. He reminded himself of this because it would be easy to forget. It would be easy to let rage consume him. He could not allow that. Enemy fleet is engaging, his tactical officer reported. 10,000 warships, just as predicted. Admiral's voice came over the fleet communication channel. All ships, execute battle plan Omega, for Earth, for everyone we've lost, for the future. The Battle of Prime began. It was the largest space battle in galactic history. 12,000 ships on the Coalition side, 10,000 on the side. The darkness of space was filled with light as weapons fired and ships exploded. The void itself seemed to burn. Captain Amy, now promoted to Commodore, commanded a carrier group on the left flank. She had survived hundreds of battles over the past decade. She had become the most decorated pilot in human history. But this battle scared her in a way the others had not. This was the end, one way or another. All fighters launch, she ordered. Target their command ships. We cut off the head and the body will fall. Her fighters screamed into the battle. They were outnumbered and outmatched in almost every way. But they were human and they did not know how to quit. On the ground, Coalition forces began landing on Prime. They led the assault, their massive forms wadding through enemy fire like walking tanks. Behind them came human marines and soldiers from a dozen other species. They pushed toward the capital city, toward the Imperial Palace, toward Emperor himself. Danny Holt was with the ground forces. Some of his officers had argued that a general should not be in the front lines. He had ignored them. He had started this war as a soldier. He would end it as one. The fighting in the streets was brutal. They defended there with desperate courage. Every building was a fortress. Every street was a battlefield. The casualties mounted on both sides. But the Coalition kept advancing. In orbit, the battle was turning. The fleet was larger, but the Coalition was fighting with a ferocity that the Empire had never seen. Human ships rammed into enemy vessels when their weapons failed. Pilots flew suicide missions into critical targets. Nobody retreated. Nobody surrendered. Admiral Chris saw the moment of crisis approaching. The super dreadnought, the pride of the Empire, was tearing through Coalition ships like they were made of paper. It was the largest warship in the galaxy, bristling with weapons that could destroy a small moon. If it was not stopped, the battle was lost. made his decision. He had been fighting for 10 years. He was 75 years old. His body was failing, but his will was iron. "All hands abandon ship," he ordered. "That's an order. Everyone off except me." His crew protested. He ignored them. When the last escape pod launched, he took the helm himself and aimed his flagship directly at the pride of the Empire. "This is Admiral Chris," he broadcast on all frequencies. "I started this war with a promise. I said we would not die quietly. I kept that promise." His ship accelerated to maximum speed and struck the super dreadnought directly in its reactor core. The explosion destroyed both vessels and killed the admiral commanding their fleet. The enemy formation shattered. The coalition forces surged forward. Amy heard about's death and felt tears running down her face. She wiped them away and took command of the fleet. "Admiral gave us our chance," she said. "Don't waste it. All ships press the attack." On the ground, Danny Holt reached the Imperial Palace. The building was ancient, a monument to 12,000 years of conquest. Now it was surrounded by coalition forces. "Breach the doors," Danny ordered. The assault on the palace lasted 2 hours. Room by room, corridor by corridor, the coalition forces fought their way toward the throne room. Danny lost count of how many enemies he killed. He stopped thinking about it. He just moved forward. Emperor was waiting for him on the throne. The ancient ruler was alone. His guards were dead. His fleet was broken. His empire was crumbling. But he sat on his throne with dignity, watching the human approach. "So you are the one," said, "the leader of these humans. I have watched recordings of your species, studied you. I still do not understand." Danny kept his weapon trained on the Emperor. "What don't you understand? Why did you fight? When we attacked your world, you should have surrendered. Logic demanded it. You were primitives facing the greatest power in the galaxy. You should have known you could not win." Danny thought about the question. He thought about his parents, killed in the first attack. He thought about the billions who had died. He thought about every soldier he had lost over 10 years of war. "We fought because you gave us no choice. We fought because surrender was never an option. We fought because that's what humans do. You wanted to make us into slaves. Instead, you made us into something else. You made us into the force that destroyed your empire." Was silent for a moment, then he laughed. It was a strange sound, almost admiring. "We created our own destruction. How fitting." The Emperor was taken prisoner. The throne room was secured. The war was over. Destroyed her notes on the Nova bomb. She had never wanted to build it, and now that it was no longer needed, she wanted to make sure no one ever could. Some weapons were too terrible to exist. Was given a choice by Danny Holt: help rebuild the galaxy or face trial for his crimes. He chose to help. It was not redemption, not really, but it was a start. Addressed the newly formed Galactic Coalition. Representatives from hundreds of species listened as she spoke. "The age of empires is over," she declared. "No species will ever again rule over others through force. We will build something new, something based on cooperation, not conquest, freedom, not slavery. This is the legacy of those who fought and died. This is what their sacrifice bought." Return to Earth. The planet was but healing. Cities were being rebuilt. Children were playing in streets that had been battlefields. She planted a flag in the ashes of Chicago, in the same spot where she had organized the first resistance cell 10 years ago. The flag showed Earth and dozens of other worlds united together. It was the symbol of the new coalition. It was the symbol of hope. Danny Holt stood before the memorial on Earth. It was a massive wall of names, listing every human who had died in the war. Billions of names, too many to ever read, found him there. They stood together in silence for a long time. Finally, Danny spoke. "We won." Shook her head. "We survived. Now we have to make sure no one ever has to fight like this again." Danny looked up at the sky. The stars were visible in the twilight. Once they had been a source of fear. Now they were full of allies, friends, and former enemies working to build something better. The thought they were ending us, he said. Instead, they introduced us to the galaxy. They thought they were making an example. Instead, they made a mistake. He turned away from the memorial and walked toward the future. There was still work to be done. There would always be work to be done. But for the first time in 10 years, Danny Holt felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. Above Earth, ships from a dozen species orbited peacefully. Human children and children and children played together on space stations. The galaxy was healing. And in the history books of 1,000 worlds, the story was recorded. They struck Earth first. They killed billions. They expected surrender. Instead, they awoke something they could not comprehend. They awoke humanity. The stars would remember.